Last time we began considering what interpretive approach we should adopt when reading the book of Revelation, and there are three of them: preterist, futurist, and idealist. The preterist position holds that everything from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 19 was fulfilled in the first century, specifically with the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The futurist approach believes that chapter 4 all the way to chapter 19 will be fulfilled in the future, in the last few years before the second coming of Jesus. But the idealist approach believes that the book of Revelation, specifically up through chapter 19, presents timeless principles which take place throughout the entire inner Advent age before the second coming. Now, we concluded last time that the preterist approach should be rejected because it demands a Neronian date, which is highly unlikely. We turn now to Revelation chapter 1 to consider how the genre of this book, or should I say genres, influence whether we should use a futurist or an idealist approach when reading this book. And this may seem boring. There's lots of terms we got flying around here, but it's a critically important question because it influences, again, how we are to read and interpret every verse in this book. Take a look with me at the opening verses of the book of Revelation, and let's dive into our study of the genre of this text. Look specifically at verse 4. John, to the seven churches that are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who was, who is, was, and who is to come, that's the Father, and from Jesus, the faithful witness. Now, does that sound familiar to you, that little opening? Well, it should. Open with me to Romans chapter 1. And what does it say? Paul, to all those who are in Rome, grace to you and peace from one God the Father and to the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, that's awfully like Revelation, isn't it? What about 1 Corinthians? Paul, to the church that is in Corinth, grace to you and peace from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. We could do this all day. Now to Galatians, Paul, to the churches of Galatia, grace and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. So you get it, don't you? The book of Revelation may have all kinds of crazy visions in it, but it opens with a standard letter introduction. So the first genre we're going to consider in the book of Revelation is an epistle. Revelation is a letter from John, exiled on the island of Patmos, to seven churches in Asia. Now, why these seven churches? Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira. Well, shortly before AD 70, the Apostle John, when he saw the tumult there in Judea, left his base of ministry there in Judea and moved to Ephesus and started pastoring the churches in that region. Let me show you a map which shows these seven churches in Asia. Take a look here at this map. So scroll in a little bit here. Here's the island of Patmos. That's where John is exiled and where he receives the vision which he records in the book of Revelation. And he sends this letter to these seven churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. You notice how they form a perfect circle. This is the order in which the seven churches are addressed in chapter 2 and 3. Well, John is given a specific message to each of these seven churches from Jesus himself. So whatever the book of Revelation is about, it must be relevant to those seven churches. And interestingly, this message of Revelation is mediated to John through an angel. Take a look at this chain of transmission in the first couple of verses in Revelation. It's quite interesting. This whole book, it says, what it is a revelation of Jesus, which God gave him, whom he made known by sending an angel to John, who then bore witness to all that he saw to these seven churches. A five-step chain of transmission by which this book came into existence. Quite interesting. Well, this revelation, this chain of transmission tells us, comes directly from the throne room of God himself, this revelation. And in the Greek, that word revelation is apocalypsis, an apocalypse. So that's our second genre. Revelation is a letter, it's an epistle. Revelation is also an apocalypse. An apocalypse is a specific form of Jewish literature which was very common between the years about 200 BC to about 100 AD. And within Jewish apocalypses, how they function is they reveal or they unveil something that was formerly hidden or unknown, specifically through visions of end times events. And these visions are oftentimes interpreted by an angelic interpreter who kind of like walks the visionary through that experience. Well, the vision of the exalted and risen Jesus here in chapter 1 will give us a taste of some of the mind-bending, apocalyptic, visionary nature of this book. Let's take a look at this vision of Jesus, which John receives on the island of Patmos. It's pretty wild. We're going to jump back to Revelation 1. So here John is. He's on the island of Patmos, just doing his thing. But he hears something, a loud voice, a voice as loud as a trumpet, blaring behind him. And he turns around to see, man, who is speaking to me? And on turning, look what he saw. He saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands, one like the Son of Man. Who is this? This is Daniel 7. This is Jesus himself. Jesus is most common self-description in the Gospels. The Son of Man, clothed with a long robe and a golden sash. The hair of his head was white. His eyes were like flaming fire. His feet like burnished bronze. His voice like the roar of many waters. And in his right hand, he held the 7 stars. And from his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword. His face was shining like the sun in full strength. I mean, this incredible, awe-inspiring scene, it's honestly just on the border of our comprehension. We're trying to imagine what it is that John saw. But here's the central question, okay? Does the imagery and the symbolism which is baked into that vision that John saw on Patmos, does that give us license to dismiss the literal predictions which are made in this book? I don't think so. You see, even in apocalyptic literature, the symbols have literal reference. So what are our earliest examples of apocalyptic literature? Ezekiel, Daniel, Zechariah. And Daniel, he certainly saw wild visions, didn't he? I mean, he saw like beasts come out of the sea with like unearthly features, totally crazy. But every one of those beasts that he saw in Daniel 7, and every feature of those beasts had a corresponding literal, comprehensible referent. So when Daniel saw a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings crawling out of the sea, that leopard represented the kingdom of Greece. And this literal kingdom of Greece is going to literally divide into 4 different kingdoms, 4 different parts for the 4 heads. You see, the image that Daniel saw was fantastic, but its meaning is not generic. It's not referring to all worldly opposition against God and his church throughout all ages. No, it's referring very specifically to Greece and the 4 kingdoms. I think that one of the problems with the idealist approach to the book of Revelation is that it flattens the text. It flattens the meaning of the text, that many of its images just refer to the same thing. The 24 elders in the throne room of God in chapter 24, according to the idealist approach, well, they're just simply the church. And then the 144,000 from all the 12 tribes of Israel, that's the church. The great multitude in the second half of chapter 7, that's also the church. The 2 witnesses who prophesy for 1,260 days, well, those guys are referring to the church. And then the woman who's saved and nourished in the wilderness, who has 12 stars over her head, well, that's got to be the church too. And then her offspring, yeah, that's also the church. This approach, this idealist approach, strips John of any ability to say anything specific or nuanced, to make any actual predictions about future events. Now, I think another problem with the idealist approach is its tendency to abstraction. So think about the opponents that are described in chapters like 12, 13, and 17. The beast, the false prophet, the prostitute in chapter 17. If they simply refer to all opposition against God and his people throughout all ages, then the details in the text, of which there are many, many specific details, well, they become irrelevant. Who cares about the details if these enemies are just the general opponents of God throughout all ages? Details don't matter. All specificity is lost, it is whitewashed, and we're given permission to treat the text loosely. And I don't like that. And therefore, that is why we are going to treat the book of Revelation with a futurist perspective. It is an apocalyptic epistle, but it is also it presents a prophecy of the future. And that's our third genre. It is a prophecy. Now that word prophecy, it's used 21 times in the book of Revelation. And this book, it calls itself a book of prophecy. Look with me again at Revelation chapter 1. Let's go back up to the beginning. In verse 3, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy. So this book is a prophecy. Let's jump now to the last chapter, specifically verse 7. Behold, I am coming soon, Jesus said. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of the words of the prophecy of this book. So this book contains prophecy. Do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. I warn everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. Now, did you catch that? This is kind of neat. The person who studies the words of the prophecy of this book will be blessed, right? That there was a specific beatitude which is prescribed to studiers of the book of Revelation. So y'all are going to be blessed by watching these videos. Isn't that fun? Let's look at those beatitudes compiled in a list. And surprise, surprise, there are exactly 7 beatitudes. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of these prophecy. Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have access to the tree of life. Blessed is the one who reads the prophecy of this book. 7 beatitudes. Now, that is the first of many 7s in the book of Revelation. Pretty neat. These are all 7s. This list on the left is every occurrence where the word 7 is used. The specific Greek word for 7 is applied to the 7 spirits of God, the 7 churches, 7 stars, and of course the 7 seals, trumpets, and bowls. There are 7 kings, 7 crowns, 7 horns. And then this is very interesting as well. These are 7 times that certain words, phrases, or ideas are repeated. Of course, 7 beatitudes. The word kingdom is used 7 times. The phrase book of life repeated 7 times. Amazing. 7 times the word earthquake is used. It's very fascinating. John, the way that he crafted this book is unbelievable. Well, the book, this book of prophecy, now mind you, it's the only book of prophecy in the New Testament, quite interesting. This New Testament book of prophecy is saturated with references to the Old Testament. So the book of Revelation has 404 verses in it, and scholars estimate that there's over 250 references to the Old Testament in those 404 verses. Some people would even double that number, 500 references to the Old Testament. Incredible. Well, among those, the books of the Old Testament that Revelation references, among the very most important is the book of Daniel. Now, one of the crucial elements that Revelation borrows from the book of Daniel is its use of numbers, specifically lengths of time. And you'll notice in reading through the book of Revelation, a specific length of time, a period, is going to be repeated again and again and again. We have 42 months, 1,260 days, time, times, and half of a time. Let's look at these references compiled in a chart. On this tribulation timing in the book of Revelation, the temple or the city of Jerusalem will be trampled for 42 months, but my 2 witnesses will prophesy for 1,260 days. The woman will flee into the wilderness and be nourished for a time, times, and half a time, which is equivalent to 1,260 days. The beast, he will exercise authority for 42 months. Now, this is borrowed, this time period is borrowed from the book of Daniel. It uses the same time period where the little horn of Daniel, who's equivalent with the beast in Revelation 13, he is going to wear out the saints for times and a half a time. Now, one time is a year. Times, plural, is 2 years. And a half of a time, well, that's a half year. So we're adding up to 3.5 years. Let's see. The shattering of the power of the Holy One will be for that length of time. And this covenant will take place for half of a week. Half of a week is 3.5 years. 1 week is 7 years. That's the time period that's referred to in the all-important Daniel chapter 9. Well, if Daniel is among the most important Old Testament books for understanding the book of Revelation, then Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 9 are among the most important chapters for understanding the book of Revelation. And in Daniel 9, 24 to 27 is the Daniel's 70-week prophecy. So this isn't a class on the book of Daniel, so I'm going to try to be brief in describing what this Daniel 70-week prophecy is all about. So Daniel, he's in exile in Babylon, isn't he? And he's looking at his watch. He's like, man, we've been here almost 70 years. And I know that the exile is supposed to be over after 70 years. That's what I read about in Jeremiah chapter 25. So he starts to pray that God would restore the kingdom to Israel, bring them back to the land. And Gabriel, the angel, shows up to Daniel, and he gives Daniel some bad news. He's like, you know what? You thought that the kingdom would be restored to Israel after 70 years? Bummer, man. It's going to be 70 times 7 years. That's 70 weeks or 490 years. That's when the kingdom is going to be restored to Israel. Let's jump over to Daniel chapter 9 and take a look at this prophecy. So let's go to Daniel 9. Scroll down to verse 24. 70 weeks or 70 periods of 7 years are decreed for your people. And what's going to take place after these 70 weeks? Well, we're going to finish transgression. We're going to put an end to sin, atone for iniquity. That's all great. Then look at this. After 70 weeks, we're going to bring in everlasting righteousness, anoint a holy place. This is the establishment of the Messianic kingdom, which will take place after that period of 490 years. Now we're given a timer when we are to start counting. We're going to start looking at our watch and counting those 490 years. And that is here in verse 25, that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, that's when this all begins, when there is an order to go back and build the city specifically. Now, we need to look at a little chart about Daniel's 70 weeks. 70 weeks are decreed for all this stuff to happen, and it is to begin from the going out of the word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, it seems incredibly likely that this was Artaxerxes' commission of Nehemiah to go back and rebuild the walls of the city of Jerusalem, recorded in Nehemiah chapter 2. Well, if we're to continue in this prophecy, we know that after 69 weeks, which is 62 plus 7, something very important is going to happen. After those 69 weeks, an anointed one, that is a Messiah, will be cut off and have nothing. We're talking about the death of Jesus, which is going to take place after 69 weeks or 483 years or 173,880 days. Now, wow, why am I sharing with you all of this incredible detail? Well, here's why. Why does Daniel 9, 24 to 27 matter for studying the book of Revelation? Well, if I can prove to you that Daniel's 69 weeks was fulfilled literally, exactly, precisely to the day, that gives us a rationale for taking this period of 1,260 days literally as the second half of a 7-year tribulation, as Daniel's 70th week. Did you see how significant this is? Then we can understand the action of the book of Revelation as taking place over that final 7-year period. Well, if we're going to do that, we're going to need to do a little bit of math. So take out your calculator and join me on this chart working through Daniel's first 69 weeks. That's what we're going to calculate together. Was that period fulfilled exactly precisely to the day? Well, when did it start? Very precisely from the going out of the word to rebuild Jerusalem, which Nehemiah chapter 2 tells us was in the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes. We know Artaxerxes began to reign in the year 465, so 20 years later, that's 445. But it gets a little more complicated. You see, oftentimes when we're counting the length of a certain king's reign in Persia, we don't count the ascension year, which is their first year. So then we have to back it a year back to the year 444 BC. And Nehemiah 2 tells us that it happened in the month of Nisan, the month of Nisan. However, it doesn't tell us the day. But oftentimes, if you look back at these ancient records, if the day is not included, well, that means it took place on the first day of the month. So we are assuming that this whole prophecy began on Nisan 1 in the year 444 BC. But what does Nisan mean? Who knows? I mean, it's not relevant to us. We must first then convert the Jewish calendar, where Nisan is one of its months, to a Gregorian calendar that we're familiar with. So Nisan 1 in the Jewish calendar is March 28th in our Gregorian calendar, the year 444 BC. And then there's another step in this process where we have to convert between a Hebrew and Babylonian calendar, which jumps it back another month. So very precisely, you guys, this whole prophecy of Daniel's 70 weeks is going to begin on the day, February 27th, the year 444 BC. All right, now is that specific enough for you? So it is from this day that we must start counting these 69 weeks to get to the time when the Anointed One will be cut off, when Jesus will die on the cross. So let's add 69 weeks to this day. First step, we got to convert the weeks to years, 483 years. Then we got to convert the years to days, and the Hebrew calendar didn't have 365-day years. It had 360-day years because each month was only 30 days long. So that's going to take us to 173,880 days. So now we have to convert these biblical years to our Gregorian years. And our Gregorian years are 365 days long, aren't they? Well, no, they're not, because you have to account for leap years, which means that our years are very precisely 365.24219,879 days long. So you do that, and this length of time, this 483 years, is precisely 476 years and about 25 days. So that is what you have to add to the start of the prophecy, the going out of the word to rebuild Jerusalem. And when you do that, you add that together, you get exactly March 24th, AD 33. Now, does that look pretty similar to the death of Jesus? Well, it should. So March 24th is equivalent to Nisan 6 in the Jewish calendar. Okay, what is the next step in our process? Well, we have to determine, when did Jesus die? Well, we know that Jesus had to have died. We got to look at a picture here. He died, let's see. Jesus died on April 1st in the year AD 33. We're going to prove that in a minute. And Daniel's prophecy ended on March 24th, exactly about a week before Jesus died. Now, how do we know that Jesus died on April 1st? Well, there's a few steps in this process. First, we know that Jesus must have died during a time period in which both Caiaphas was high priest and Pontius Pilate was ruling as governor. So, and given the fact that Jesus had a 3.5-year length ministry, that he was born in about 2 or 3 BC, that gives us a very narrow range when he could have died. It had to have been between the years of AD 30 and AD 34. So which year could it have been within this range? Well, we need to narrow it down yet again, because we know that Jesus died on Passover, right? That's what the Last Supper was all about. And we know as well that Passover happened to be a Friday because that was the day of preparation. And the day of preparation is the day right before the Sabbath. Sabbath is a Saturday, day of preparation is a Friday. And the only year in which the Passover, which is Nisan 14, lands on a Friday is the year AD 33. It's on a Wednesday in the year 30. It's on a Monday in the year 31. It's on a Monday again in AD 32. But in AD 33, it is on a Friday. Therefore, we know that Jesus died precisely on April 1st in the year AD 33. So taking it back then to the fulfillment of Daniel 9's 69-week prophecy, we have the prophecy ending very precisely on March 24th. And then the very next day, Jesus arrives in Jerusalem. That evening, he's anointed by Mary for his coming death. Then on Saturday, there's the Sabbath. On Sunday is his triumphal entry. Monday, he overturns the tables in the temple. He teaches on Tuesday and Wednesday. He's arrested Thursday night after his Last Supper meal with his disciples, and then he dies on that Friday. Now, do you see the significance of this? How critically important it is for the book of Revelation? If Daniel told us, or if Gabriel revealed to Daniel specifically the exact year, the exact month, the exact week when the Messiah would be cut off, when he would die, if that 69 weeks was fulfilled so precisely, so exactly, then we have every reason to expect that Daniel's 70th week will be fulfilled just as precisely, even if we need to have a gap between the 69th and the 70th week. If the first 69 weeks were fulfilled so exactly, then so should the 70th week, which is composed of two 1,260-day periods, the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years. And so that's how we're going to approach the book of Revelation. It records the events that will take place during Daniel's 70th week, the final 7.5 years before the second coming of Jesus, the tribulation as we call it. Well, Daniel tells us when this last 7 years is going to start. It's going to start when an individual makes a covenant with Israel. Take a look again at Daniel's 70-week prophecy. Let's go back here. So the anointed one will be cut off after 69 weeks. But then in the final week, well, we have some nefarious individual is going to make a covenant for 1 week, and then something horribly wrong is going to happen at the midpoint, at half of the week, and he's going to put an end to sacrifice. Well, this individual, he goes by many names. He is the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, the son of perdition, the beast, the little horn. And he is what kicks off this 70th week. And as we progress through the book of Revelation, we are going to witness many different events being painted onto the canvas of Daniel's 70th week. Let me pull up a canvas of the 70th week for you. This is one of the most important charts, in my opinion, for understanding the book of Revelation. Daniel's 70th week. Now, we can divide this period into a lot of critical stages. So we have, of course, first half and a second half. And there's going to be certain events that are very important that happen at the very beginning of this 70th week. And then there are other events that we can locate there in the first half. And then a lot of events take place right at the midpoint of that final 70th week. And then other events kind of as the 70 years are coming to a close before Jesus' second coming there at the end of Daniel's 70th week. But for now, let's throw a couple of events here on this chart. We know that it's going to begin with the Antichrist making a covenant with Israel, Daniel 9:27. And then at the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week, he's going to break that covenant by establishing the abomination of desolation in the temple there in Jerusalem, proclaiming himself to be God. But he will be destroyed, thrown into the lake of fire at Jesus' second coming in Revelation 19, verse 19. totally incredible. Well, that is the macro structure, the timeline, which provides for us our framework for understanding the events of this 70th week, the 7-year tribulation. But Revelation itself gives us its own inspired table of contents in chapter 1, verse 19. Let's look at Revelation's own table of contents. Jump now to Revelation chapter 1, not 21, chapter 1. So in verse 19, this is after John's vision of the Son of Man glorified. That same Son of Man tells to John to write the things you have seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this. Now, do you see how there's 3 sections that John is required to record? The things you have seen. Now, what has John seen at this point in verse 19 of the book? The only thing that he's seen is the vision of Jesus himself in chapter 1. So the things you have seen is chapter 1 of the book. And then the things that are, that is referring to this present age, the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3. And then the things that take place after this is everything after chapter 4, 4:1 to the end. And I think that this interpretation, this division, is confirmed for us in the very first verse of chapter 4. Take a look at this. So 3 things you've seen, things that are, those that are to take place after this. If we jump over to chapter 4, John is invited up to the throne room. Come up here and I will show you what must take place after this. The same exact phrase from chapter 1, the things that are to take place after this. So it seems to me that everything from chapter 4 on is events of the future, things that will take place, things that are prophesied to take place in Daniel's 70th week, the 7-year tribulation. But we are going to look first at the things that are, the 7 churches, the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation 2 to 3 next.